Okay, can everyone hear me? Can you hear me okay? Yeah? All right, then let's start for today's session. So thanks for joining me today at Cheers to Chaos. And as you might have noticed, we brought beer because it's one of the topics that I want to discuss with you today. So cheers to that, if it's not too early for you to drink a can of beer. So I want to introduce myself real quick, talk about two incidents in Belgium that has happened recently. I want to talk a little bit about ransomware and hacktivism and how we actually see that they're crossing over each other lately. And then I want to briefly dive into the threat landscape of what we're seeing in hacktivism and ransomware very briefly, because there's a lot going on right now and I only have 30 minutes today. So my name is Diana Zeg-Paulson. You can connect with me on LinkedIn if you want, if you have any comments or questions afterwards. I'm a lead security researcher at Orange Cyber Defense. I've been working for them since 7 years. I began in operations in the Cybersec, moved to a local Swedish team, threat research, and then now I've been 2.5 years in the global research unit of Orange Cyber Defense. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about Belgium and cyber extortion and ransomware. And I mentioned actually cyber extortion and ransomware simultaneously. I do that because our industry does and the media does, but I just quickly want to differentiate between those two. Ransomware is one outcome of cyber extortion. Since a few years, we actually see a phenomenon called double extortion, where threat actors have added a layer or several layers of extortion. And we don't necessarily see encryption any longer. So ransomware is one outcome, and the umbrella term is cyber extortion. So I just want to make that clear. So in the beginning of March, the public became well known of Duvel, of the cyber incident at Duvel. And I think anyone in this region, in Belgium or in Benelux or in Europe, have heard of that incident. The consequences or the impact of that incident were that the Belgian sites were down, the site in the United States were down, but the spokesman actually said, okay, don't you worry, we will have enough beer for now. Our warehouses are stocked. Not everyone took that so lightly, and that actually shows the cultural aspect of it, of Belgium and beer, and how that goes in one hand, really. A few days later, actually, a coffee roaster fell victim to another cyber attack. And what makes it so interesting is actually the proximity of the timing and the geographical location. They were actually just 1 kilometer away from each other. And those are not just local known beer breweries or coffee roasters. It's actually, Duvel is an international exporter, and Bayers is the largest coffee roaster in Belgium. And interesting about that is that we don't know who claimed the second attack. At least I haven't found any information about it. We know that Stormis, one of the cyber extortionate groups that we follow, has claimed Duvel and has given them a deadline till the end of March. So let's continue with what we know so far about Stormis, because once you dig into Stormis, it becomes actually a really interesting story about them. So we know that they've been active since 2015. We know that they're financially motivated. We know that they're politically motivated because they're actually in connection with Conti, another CyX operation. They supported Russia when the war in the Ukraine began in 2022. We see two communication channels, Telegram, as you just saw, and this is one of their leak sites. They've undergone a lot of changes lately. They seem to be a little bit in identity crisis, not knowing who they want to be and what they want to do. This is the latest version of their leak site. They are part of the 5 families. Does anyone recognize that term, the 5 families, in connection with crime or in connection with organized crime? Does anyone have heard of that? No? The 5 families is actually an Italian-American mafia crime family in New York City. And they have been doing that since the 1900s. So they can actually be traced back to the 1920s, but officially they were established in 1931. And they still up and running and operational, the real world 5 families in New York City. So it's really interesting that they chose that name. And they have actually joined forces with those 5 hacktivism group. Stormis has had a really good collaboration with GhostSec. And GhostSec actually went from politically motivated to financially motivated last autumn when they advertised on Telegram a new generation of ransomware as a service, Ghost Locker. And Stormis helped them improve in the 3rd version. So you can actually see here on the leak side, I don't know if you see that up on the very left, Stormis X Ghost Locker. So they're saying we are using GhostSec's Ghost Locker. SiegeSec has been kicked out by now because they didn't comply to the values of the group. And then actually Black Forums has also been dysfunctioned, and that's very typical in that space, right? In cyberspace, it's a very impatient space. It's a very fast-moving space. Okay, and then we actually see more crossovers like this, like Stormis and GhostSec, not just in Belgium. Last autumn, we, for example, saw the pro-Ukraine hacktivist group taking down a Russian cyber extortion or ransomware group, Trigona. We saw Ransom VC trying to buy or looking for buying access in Iran or in Palestine after the Israeli-Palestine war broke out. We saw Anonymous Sudan switching from religiously motivated to politically motivated to financially motivated. And then they can't be a hacktivist group anymore. Then they are a financially motivated actor. They've been actually trying to receive ransom to stop their DDoS a year ago actually. And then GhostSec, who's involved with Stormis and Ghost Locker. Malek team as a last example, who are under the umbrella of cyber extortion, but they actually targeting Israeli companies and destroying their data. So I've actually seen some of the listings that said destroyed 10 terabyte of data. So then that's problematic as well. I've been researching the leak sites quite a lot, and we've published a lot about the narratives the threat actors are telling us and what they don't tell us, basically. And I brought 2 snippets today, and I'm wondering if you can actually see them. Yeah, you can. I want to focus on the first 2 sentences. This is from the Stormis leak site. It's not Duvel, it's a different victim. And the affiliate in this case. So someone has published a victim, you click on the read more button and you get some more information about what happened. And they say, I cannot explain the access method to avoid violating the rules of operation. Sounds very cryptic, but what it means is when a victim organization falls victim to cyber extortion, the threat actors promise them a deliverable. If you pay, you get a security breach report from us. We tell you how we got in. In this case, the affiliate cannot do that because they have published the victim already, which means the victim has not paid. And thus, they would violate the rules of this operation. But I work with dealing with other ransomware program members. This is something that does not violate the rule of working with Stormis. So he or she says, I'm also working with other operations, not just Stormis, and that is okay with Stormis to do. And then he or she goes on and says, known to others, but we work on a percentage, whether with them or with the other, with the Stormis operator, especially in access operations to major companies. So that just shows the ecosystem that splits the profit. So the affiliates often get the most in percentage, and then the operators get the rest or others involved in this. It's a bit cryptic. And then I found this at another victim saying, we downloaded everything from a FTP server in their network, hacked and enjoyed messing with their training programs, okay, down the main website, down their entire internal and external network, resulting in zero connectivity. So in the CIA impact, it means everything. Confidentiality is always compromised when someone compromises your network files and systems. Integrity, they've actually altered material, as I've stated openly here, and then they have DDoS the victim after, just to increase the pressure and make them comply to their ransom demands. So that was my reaction. It's nothing new, really, but it's it was really shocking to see, and I can only imagine the victim experience for that organization. It must have been horrific. But let's return to beer, and let's return to Duvel. At the end of March, Duvel actually appears on another CyX operation leak site, Blackbuster, which was a bit of a surprise. But I just come out of a research period where we finalized today our second annual ransomware report, and we looked into reappearances of victims. So in the last 3.5 years, how many victim organizations have we been seeing that reoccurred on other threat actors' pages or leak sites? Can we find a relationship? How long has it been in between? I can't go into this. This is like a whole new presentation, but I just wanted to show you the messiness, the unpredictability, and the existence of this phenomenon, actually. We found that we see victims reappearing anything between 0 days and 1,301 days, which translates into 3.5 years. Okay, let's dive quickly into ransomware and then close up with hacktivism. So I've mentioned already a little bit the attack chain, different actors involved in this. You know, we could look at this as a linear picture in, through, out, but we do think it's much more dynamic than that. We see different roles, we see different actors, we see different relationships, and you know, the ecosystem is outsourcing itself and kind of evolving very quickly. So we actually put a lot of effort into creating a web-based cybercrime graph that we're still working on and hoping to publish after summer. This is just a cluster of ransomware as a service, but we actually want to try to understand the whole thing, like the whole thing of cybercrime, and then everyone can just zoom into the forms of crime that they're interested in. So what do we know? We've been tracking double extortion, cyber extortion since the very beginning, when Mace started to leak name and shame victims on their leak sites. I think there's a lot of things to look at this time graph here. So if we look from left to right, we see an increased amount of victims being posted on the dark web. If we look per year, we actually see that 2020, 2021 show very similar victim patterns. So they begin slow and they increase throughout the year. And then something happened in 2022, and then a year after, we kind of come back to the same patterns as we've seen 2 years before. Then I marked the green bars. This kind of, it displays the last 12 months, because as I said, we've just been working on our annual ransomware report, and where we're standing at now after Q1, 12 months back, we actually see that the highest numbers we've ever recorded was in the last 12 months. We've seen over 1,000 victims being posted per quarter. That's insane. So what happened in 2022, and I think we're all aware of it, in 2022, the war against Ukraine began. One of the most prolific groups back then, Conti, actually announced support to Russia and paid the consequences with the Conti leaks. It did come a little bit to a surprise, because they've been so hard trying to tell us that they are not political. They've always been telling us, we are only interested in money, we don't want to destroy your business, we don't care about your business, we apolitical, we don't want to get involved in politics. And then just like that, overnight, they did. And that didn't just go for cyber extortion, that went for so many other groups, as you can see in the box on the right side, siding on each side in the conflict. So what's interesting is that the ecosystem seems to be, so if we agree that 2022 was an anomaly, and we look only from 1 year before to 1 year after war, then we actually see that we see an 82% increase of victims and just a 10% increase of engagement into this crime. So the ecosystem seems to be very effective, unfortunately. So if we then look back what happened in the last 12 months, we see English-speaking countries impacted a lot. We've always seen them impacted the most. So the US, Great Britain, Canada, for example. But we also see in total numbers that Europe is the second biggest impacted region of ransomware or cyber extortion. But then if you zoom out of this, you actually see that every region has an increase except China. They've always been very little in our data set to begin with, and we also have regions that have never shown up in our victim data, like some of the CIS countries, for example. But we have recently only seen that CyX actors openly state that they don't want to impact China, Iran, or the CIS countries as we've known for a long time, actually. So if we come back from the global perspective to look just into Europe, we see an increasing trend over time, especially in 2023. Partly this can be explained just by the volume in 2023, the increase that we've seen globally. And then Belgium shows very much the global trend. You can see in 2020, 2021, how it is increasing over time slowly. It does the same in 2022, it drops, and then just comes back with the highest volume that we've seen in 2023. So it's very much in line with the global trend. Okay, let's put ransomware, cyber extortion on the side and move to hacktivism. I think I want to take a minute to look at terminology before we move on to hacktivism, because I think it's important that what is hacktivism and what cannot be hacktivism, but we're still observing it under the umbrella of hacktivism. So this is a definition that says, okay, hacktivism needs to be online because it comes from activism, right? Someone is vigorously campaigning for change, social or political change. So it needs to be transgressive, it needs to be online. So it's activism plus technology using hacking methods or just technology. It needs to be politically motivated. If it's hacking for fun, if it's doing destruction or there for destroying things, it cannot be called hacktivism any longer. And it needs to be non-violent, which means accepting the risk of endangering human life, causing severe financial loss, causing severe destruction to physical property, cannot be hacktivism any longer. So let's keep that in mind. So again, with hacktivism, hacktivism has been around for a long time, so has ransomware, double extortion, not as long, but still it's been around for some time. But something changed in 2022 when the war against Ukraine began. And that was that at the time in Ukraine, the Minister of Digital Transformation called out for help the moment the war began. And that was something that we've never observed before. A nation state encouraging their civilians or anyone really to help them fight their war. So they created the first IT army of Ukraine ever seen. But that didn't just go for pro-Ukraine. That actually happened also on other sides. CyberKnow is tracking this. They're doing a fantastic job and they're updating this. So you actually see the yellow ones since February have been added to this list. They've recognized 125 different hacktivism groups involved in this conflict. And then they recognized 137 groups involved in the Israeli-Palestine war. So what I'm seeing, just looking at this very briefly, I recognize groups that I have also seen in the other conflict, but I also recognize groups because they have made some news. Predatory Sparrow, I don't know if someone recognizes that name. They've been in the news in July last year when they impacted and did a physical attack on the Iranian steel mill. And we all saw like a video of an explosion and 2 people running away from that. So again, if you accept the risk of human life, endangering human life, and if you cause severe damage to property, you cannot be called a hacktivist any longer. I recognize mysterious team Bangladesh, who's been involved in the Nordics in a big information campaign last year there. I recognize Anonymous Sudan, the same, last year in the Nordics, but also somewhere else. They just created themselves last year in January. Killnet, very well known as a pro-Russian hacktivist or hacker collective, and then Cyber Avengers, who's been involved in the water utility incidents in, what was it? Was it Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, something like that, and Ireland. So we see. We've been wondering last year, okay, if we see so much activity, it's such a messy space, some are doing, or some are hacktivists, others are not really, or cannot really call it that. Is there a group that is politically consistent? And we actually recognized No Name, also a pro-Russian hacktivist group, as being very politically consistent. They've been impacting the West, NATO countries, or actually along Russia's unfriendly country list. Any country that has been publicly committed to help the Ukraine, they as a reaction attack. And then those are examples from Germany and Belgium that we just found very recently. So when I started looking into hacktivism 1.5 years ago, I've had a lot of interesting conversations with my colleagues, but also other people about, like, basically asking, so what? It's hacktivism, it's DDoS, like what's the impact of this? I've looked at it very closely, and we've followed some activities last year in the Nordics, but also, you know, what we've been following, what I've been showing you is a proxy of what we actually see as a global trend. And that is the impact isn't so much about the technical impact. It's about FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. It's about the information campaign behind this and the long-term changes that does. It's about influencing public perception, and we've seen stuff like that in the US election, for example, in 2016. So I think it's about the stuff that we don't see, that we can't measure, that is the most dangerous one. And it's also the most difficult one for us to recognize as an industry. So CrowdStrike actually published something in 2016, and they termed this what we're seeing, faketivism. And I don't agree with the term, but I do like the description of it. And they say faketivism refers to activity by entities that characterize themselves as hacktivist groups, but more likely represent a front for a government or otherwise professional entity. They often surface in direct response to geopolitical events, often have little or no established activity history, and almost always operate in direct alignment with state government interests. So I think this is exactly what we're observing. Just, I think it needs a better term. I just have to look at the time. I will be skipping this. This is a manifesto of No Name, basically saying we are against the West and we're fighting Russia's cyber war. So I'm often asked, what can we do to prevent ransomware from happening? And while I'm more into researching the external threat landscape as a phenomenon as a whole, we have published a guideline 3 years ago, how to beat ransomware. And I think if we would have published it 6 years ago, it would have been the same. Because at the end, we're still fighting on the same fronts. It's still the basics that we need to get in place. And I think, let's see, there's a line missing, exactly. This is from our guideline that we published 3 years ago, and I asked ChatGPT, can you make a word cloud of our general recommendation? And no matter how long I tried, it just didn't want to put anti-ransomware together, so I had to do that manually. So yeah, we still see the same attack vectors. We still see vulnerabilities exploited. We still see human exploited social engineering, and we still see credentials being misused. So if you have more concrete questions about my presentation and the research that I'm doing at Orange Cyber Defense, catch me at our booth, which is like to the right. If you have more concrete questions, what that means for you as an organization, your sector, your industry, then we have some experts that can advise you a little bit more there. But I think at the end, hacktivism is something where your victimhood is determined just due to the belonging of the industry group that you're in. It's about the industry that takes the most attention, government, public transportation, railway, and so on. But with ransomware, I think that's absolutely something that we can do to at least be ready for when crisis hits. Thank you very much.